The wind howled like a wounded animal across the frozen highway, carrying with it sharp needles of snow that erased the road and swallowed the world in white silence. In the middle of that merciless blizzard, a sleek black luxury car shuddered, coughed, and then died completely. Inside the car sat a woman whose name appeared on the covers of business magazines and billionaire rankings, a woman who owned companies across continents and skyscrapers that pierced the clouds. Yet in that moment, none of her power, money, or influence mattered. She was alone, freezing, and stranded in the middle of nowhere. Her name was Isabella Hartwell, and for the first time in years, fear wrapped itself tightly around her heart. Before we continue this emotional journey, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel if you believe in kindness and second chances. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the most powerful acts of humanity come from the most unexpected people. The storm had arrived faster than the weather forecasts predicted. Isabella had been driving from the city toward a remote investment site she planned to develop into a luxury winter resort. Her company had purchased thousands of acres of land in the mountains, and she had insisted on visiting personally despite the warnings about incoming weather. Her assistant had advised against it. Her driver had offered to go instead. But Isabella Hartwell was a woman used to controlling outcomes. She trusted schedules, numbers, and contracts, not unpredictable things like storms. Now the storm had proven her wrong. The temperature outside had dropped far below freezing, and the car's dashboard flashed warning lights like desperate cries for help. The engine had overheated, then frozen, then simply surrendered. The heater slowly faded, leaving behind a creeping cold that seeped into her fingers and bones. She tried calling for help, but her phone had no signal. The mountains around her were silent giants, cutting her off from the world she normally ruled. Minutes passed, then an hour. Snow piled higher against the car, burying the tires and frosting the windshield until the world outside vanished. For the first time in decades, Isabella felt completely powerless. Her thoughts drifted back through the years, through the boardrooms, the billion-dollar deals, the applause of investors. She had built her empire with ruthless discipline. Every decision had been calculated, every partnership carefully chosen, but wealth had come with a price. Her marriage had collapsed years earlier, crushed under the weight of endless work and ambition. Her only brother had died in an accident when she was young. Her parents had passed long before she became the woman the world now admired. Success had filled her bank accounts, but emptied her life of warmth. And now, in the freezing silence of the storm, that loneliness pressed against her chest harder than the cold. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself and closed her eyes, trying to conserve energy. The storm raged outside, roaring across the mountains like a wild beast. Then, through the blizzard, a faint shape appeared. At first she thought it was a trick of the snow, but the shape grew larger. It was a truck, old, rusted, and struggling through the storm like a stubborn survivor. The truck stopped beside her frozen car. A door opened, and a man stepped out into the violent wind. He moved slowly, leaning into the storm, his heavy boots sinking deep into the snow as he approached the car. Isabella watched through the frosted window as he knocked gently on the glass. When she opened the door, the wind exploded into the car, carrying with it icy air and swirling snow. The man standing there looked nothing like the people Isabella normally dealt with. His coat was thick but worn. His beard was dusted with snow. His hands were rough and cracked from years of labor. His eyes, however, were warm. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't seem impressed by the expensive car. He simply saw someone in trouble. Without speaking much, he helped her gather her belongings and guided her through the storm toward his truck. His movements were calm, steady, practiced, as if helping strangers in storms was something he had done many times before. The truck heater groaned to life once they were inside, filling the small cabin with slow but welcome warmth. They drove through the storm for nearly 20 minutes, following a narrow dirt road that disappeared between snow, covered fields and shadowy trees. Finally, a small farmhouse appeared in the distance, its windows glowing with soft yellow light like a beacon in the white darkness. The man parked the truck and helped Isabella inside. The farmhouse was simple, but it was warm. A wood stove crackled in the corner, filling the room with comforting heat and the smell of burning pine. A worn couch sat near the fire, and shelves lined the walls with jars of preserved vegetables. The man brought her a thick blanket and a mug of hot soup that tasted like the most comforting meal she had ever eaten. For the first time that night, Isabella felt safe. The man introduced himself simply as Daniel. He lived alone on the farm. The nearest town was nearly 30 miles away, which explained why the road had been empty during the storm. Daniel didn't ask many questions about her life. Instead, he quietly helped her warm up and let her rest near the stove. But as the hours passed, Isabella noticed something strange. Daniel carried a weight in his eyes. A quiet sadness lived behind his kindness, like a shadow he could never escape. He moved around the house with the slow caution of someone used to living carefully. Outside, the storm continued to roar, trapping them together through the night. Over the next day, the blizzard grew worse. Roads disappeared completely under snowdrifts, making travel impossible. Isabella had no choice but to stay. During that time, she began to see the life Daniel lived. The farm was small and struggling. The barn leaned slightly to one side. The tools were old. The tractor looked like it had survived decades of harsh winters. Yet everything was maintained with care. Daniel worked from sunrise to sunset, feeding animals, clearing snow, repairing fences damaged by the storm. He never complained. And despite having so little, he shared everything he had. By the second night, Isabella found herself watching him differently. She had spent her entire career surrounded by wealthy, ambitious people who measured life in profits and power. But Daniel measured life differently. He measured it in small acts of responsibility, in feeding animals before feeding himself, in helping a stranger without expecting anything in return, in surviving quietly without applause. And something about that humbled her, but the mystery remained. Sometimes, late at night, Isabella noticed Daniel sitting alone near the window, staring out into the snowy darkness with an expression filled with regret. One evening she discovered something unexpected while walking through the farmhouse. A framed photograph sat on a small wooden table. It showed a younger Daniel standing beside a smiling little girl with bright eyes and curly hair. The girl looked about 7 years old, but the house had no child's laughter, no toys, no small shoes near the door. The silence around that photograph felt heavy. When Isabella glanced toward Daniel, she saw him quickly look away, and that was the moment she realized something deeper lived inside this quiet man. A story, a pain, a secret. The storm finally passed on the third morning. The sky cleared, revealing endless fields of sparkling snow beneath a pale winter sun. Daniel managed to repair Isabella's car engine using tools from his barn. It wasn't perfect, but it would get her back to the main highway. As she prepared to leave, Isabella felt an unexpected sadness. In just a few days, this quiet farmhouse had given her something her luxury penthouse never had: peace. Before she stepped into the car, she turned back toward Daniel, who stood quietly on the porch, and that was when she noticed something she had missed before. A small wooden cross near the edge of the property. Fresh flowers rested at its base, half covered by snow. Carved into the wood was a name: Emily, 7 years old. Isabella's chest tightened as the truth began to settle in her mind. Later that day, after reaching town, she searched public records out of quiet curiosity. What she discovered stunned her. Years ago, Daniel had been involved in a tragic accident during a snowstorm. His truck had slid across an icy road and collided with another vehicle. The accident had taken the life of a young girl, Emily, his own daughter. The guilt had destroyed him. He had lost everything: his wife, his business, his reputation. People in the town whispered that he had chosen to live alone on that farm ever since, dedicating his life to quiet work and helping anyone who needed it. a man trying to repay a debt to the world that could never truly be repaid. Isabella sat in her car for a long time after reading the report. She thought about the soup he had given her, the warmth of the farmhouse, the kindness he had shown a stranger in a storm, and she realized something powerful. The poorest man she had ever met had given her the richest act of humanity she had experienced in years. Weeks passed, but Isabella could not forget the farmhouse. She could not forget Daniel. So she returned. And when she arrived, she brought something unexpected. Not money, not charity, opportunity. She offered to partner with Daniel to turn part of his land into a sanctuary, an emergency shelter for stranded travelers during winter storms, a place where no one would ever face a blizzard alone again. At first Daniel refused, but Isabella insisted, not as a billionaire helping a poor farmer, as a human repaying kindness. Years later, that small farm became known as a safe haven for travelers crossing the mountains. Hundreds of lives were saved during storms because one man refused to ignore a stranger freezing on the side of the road. And every winter, Isabella returned to the farm, not as a businesswoman, but as a friend. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need a reminder that kindness still exists in the world. And before the story ends, I have a special request. Comment the word, Hopi, if you believe people deserve second chances. Because sometimes the darkest secrets belong to people who spend the rest of their lives trying to bring light back into the world. And sometimes the people who seem to have nothing are the ones who give the most.